And so, okay, so there's that element of just like, this is just a bad way to run a business almost, right? Like, it's just like, you can't intervene at that level and have, the almost the best you can do is like the inevitable outcome anyways. And more often than not, you get a worse outcome.
Right. And a great example would be in Pennsylvania in the Senate race in 2016. If you remember,
yes,
there was that guy Fetterman who shocked everybody by doing quite well in the primary. He was that 6'6" biker populist guy.
Yep.
And then you had Sestak, who had been running and working the state and organizing for 4 years or so, getting ready for this race. But Ed Rendell in particular and the party in general hated him because he had gone against the deal that they had made with Arlen Specter, and he had primaried Specter and knocked Specter out, then lost in the general election. He, was headed towards winning the primary, and the party jumped in and got behind Katie McGinty, who, for whatever reason, they spent millions and millions of dollars. Emily's List jumped in and spent $3 or $4 million to push her through the primary. But the argument on the tactical level would be, if your candidate's so good, she shouldn't need millions of party dollars to win the primary. That might suggest that she's not the strongest candidate and will lose in the general election. And sure enough, she got smoked in the general election and lost worse than Hillary Clinton did. And most people that I talk to in Pennsylvania think that there's a very good chance Sestak, with the grassroots organizing he's been doing over the years, would have won Pennsylvania. And had he won Pennsylvania, would he have pulled in enough votes to flip it for Hillary? It is impossible to say.
Right.
But it would have changed the dynamics.
And so that's an instance on some level that may be just sort of like personal animus, you know what I mean? Or just, not even sort of like a, some type of formula. And then the other aspect of this, it seems to me, and I want to get to the ideological aspect, but the other aspect, I think it was, Lynch. He said in your piece that Democrats and Republican parties are commercial enterprises. And this also reminds me of my experience at Air America, where it was just like, you had these failed radio executives who came in and they had access. At one point, we were going to have like Blue State Digital, before it was Blue State Digital, had offered to like geo-target exactly people who would be like a 1-to-1 yield on for a mailer as to who would be an Air America listener, right? And you're telling these radio executive people, and they're like, "Nah, I'm just going to go with the guy I used to use for contests on this this Spanish radio station I did." And the reason why they're doing that is because they're going to use the company money to pay a buddy of theirs, so that when they're out of a job, their buddy's going to help them out. And it sort of feels like there's a huge element like that that's in play here too.
Right, and that goes back to your other point of whether what people are looking out for, whether it's the organization, the party, or their own interests. And human nature. You got kids, you look out for your own interests. Like that is how people operate. And so Steve Lynch's argument, he's a congressman from Massachusetts, says it's a commercial enterprise, and what he meant by that was that it is built and reproduces itself to feed the ecosystem of consultants who make their livings off of campaigns. You have consultants who do mail, some that do email, you have some that do TV ads, and you have some that nobody has any idea what they do, but they dial into conference calls and they get significant retainers for every month of advice that they give to these candidates. And a lot of these are novice candidates who are just taking the advice of the DCCC and who they should hire. And DCCC will give you a list. Here are our recommended consultants, and if you're a candidate, you are going to take the DCCC's recommendations awfully seriously. A, you might think they know what they're doing, but B, you want the DCCC to like you so that because you are always believing that they're going to come in and pump millions of dollars into your race. So, even if you might disagree with what the DCCC is telling you, you're thinking, well, I'm going to go along here with this and go along with that, so that come September, they're going to come in and tell me that they're dropping $4 million on television ads.
Right.
And they often don't, but that's the hope that these candidates have. So they pump money to these consultants. So if you raise $5 million, and you drop a couple million of that on consultants, and to place a TV ad, they charge about 15%. So to call, to say I want to put a TV ad in the Chicago metro area. If you do $1 million, 150,000 of that goes to the consultant just to place the ad, which is a lucrative way to live your life. Karl Rove actually made it his mission to nudge that 15% down to 2 or 3% among Republican consultants, because he said it was an existential issue for them. They were just burning through so much money just that was going to pay for the private schooling of Republican consultants. And so they've been able to the Republicans have been able to squeeze their consultants more because Rove made it a strategic priority, whereas the Democrats have not been as successful at that. And so you wind up having incentives to go with the candidate who has shown an ability to raise a bunch of independent money, because that money is going to go to consultants. And the nickname for E-Trip in Washington is the consultant factory. After you do a couple years there, you go out and set up your own firm. You call it, Winning Victory Strategies. And you get on the DCCC's list and make some money.
Incidentally, I would also add, that is exactly the model. I don't know if it still exists this way, but that's exactly the model with sitcoms, right? Like you're working at the studio, you're working for Disney Studios, and you're an executive there for 3 or 4 years, and then you go off and you become an independent producer. You sign a deal with Disney Studios. I mean, that's how we got shit like According to Jim. With Jim Belushi. I mean, that is exactly how that show got on, and was on for 5 or 6 years, and everybody made a ton of money, and it was a shit show. I mean, all right, but and so there's that element of this, and what's also interesting.
But it makes sense. It has its own internal logic all the way through.
Of course, because you have a bunch of individuals who are looking out for their own best, their own incentive structure, and there's nothing offsetting it in any way. I wouldn't be surprised if there were either direct kickbacks from those consultants, or at the very least sideways kickbacks, right? Like down the road incentive structures. But
the down the road incentive structure is the one you laid out. Like if you need help setting up your firm, or you want to become a partner at our firm, when you're finished toiling as Midwest political director, you can come work for Winning Target Strategies.
Of course. And here's the thing is that the Democrats don't have a Karl Rove figure who is willing to shut the barn door essentially after he gets out. But there's also a difference insofar as the Republican Party, relative to the outside groups now, has a much different dynamic. You can talk about the DCCC versus, let's say, Our Revolution or Justice Democrats or, People's House Project. And the money dynamic is nowhere relative to what the Republican Party is to, say, the Americans for Prosperity or the Koch brothers networks. Right? I mean, that's a big difference structurally.
Right. And the Kochs also, and they pride themselves more than Democrats do as people in their understanding of business. And so the Kochs did the same thing. They were like, we're not paying this 15% ripoff fee. We're going to figure out ways to get this down. But you're right. There you have a much bigger amount of money sloshing around on the Republican side.
And I would think that from an ideological perspective, like the measurement of dollars being more important than the people you have on the ground, and the assessment of like what will appeal to people in the general, that's where ideology comes in, right? I mean, it's almost like, I I mean, I keep
it's become self-fulfilling. Yeah,
Right.
It's like who can raise more money, the teacher or the medical device executives? And if you've spent, even if you started out politically the same as you graduated from college, if you spent 27 years, being a union teacher, and coaching football and being part of your, this middle class community, you have formed a certain politics over those decades. If you spent your time in the C-suite flying first class, where your friends, all their children go to private school, you live in a much nicer neighborhood. So you have different concerns, and the issues that you think about are just different. So even if your politics started the same, you just, by living in different worlds and having different friends and relationships, end up being a different person politically. And so the people who can quickly raise a couple $100,000 from their network of friends and associates tend to be the kinds of people that have been around money, and that tends to shift your politics.